Forbidden constellations. Julian Reed adjusted his oxygen filter as the thin atmosphere of Noctera whispered around him. He'd spent 3 standard months mapping the northern hemisphere of this forgotten world, when his instruments detected unusual energy signatures emanating from a valley untouched by the mining corporations. "Base camp, this is Reed," he spoke into his comms. "Moving to investigate anomalous readings in Sector 7. I'll maintain hourly check-ins." The response came with static. "Copy that, Reed. Don't take unnecessary risks. Remember protocol." Julian smiled to himself. Protocol meant little when you were 37 light-years from Earth, in a system barely documented by the Interstellar Cartography Guild. His job was to find the extraordinary, and today something extraordinary was calling to him. The valley descended into an ancient forest where trees with bioluminescent bark created an ethereal blue glow. Nocturnal creatures scurried away from his footsteps as Julian followed his scanner deeper into the untouched wilderness. For the first time since landing on this planet, he felt watched as the forest thinned. Julian found himself standing before a structure that couldn't possibly exist on an allegedly uninhabited world. A temple of sorts carved from black stone with intricate symbols etched into its surface that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. His scanner went wild, detecting energy patterns unlike anything in the Guild's database. "This changes everything," he whispered, recording the structure. "Evidence of intelligent civilization on Noctera." Julian approached cautiously, making his way through a massive archway into the temple's interior. The walls inside told stories, through elaborate carvings depicting beings with elongated limbs and what appeared to be rituals involving stars and blood. When his light touched a central altar, Julian noticed a crystalline object glowing with internal crimson light. He reached for it, driven by an inexplicable compulsion. "Don't touch that." A voice like velvet wrapped in thorns cut through the silence. Julian spun around his hand, instinctively reaching for his pulse pistol, but freezing mid-motion at the sight before him. A woman stood in the shadows, her skin a delicate shade of purple that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Her eyes were entirely black, except for crimson irises that glowed like the crystal he'd encountered non-human species before, but never one that looked so eerily humanoid yet distinctly alien. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, lowering his hand slowly. She stepped closer, moving with impossible grace. Her features were striking with angular cheekbones and eyes slightly larger than human proportion. Her hair fell in waves of midnight blue around shoulders adorned with what appeared to be ceremonial armor. "I am Thalia, last daughter of House Vess," she said, studying him with growing intensity. "But the question that matters is who? Are you human who carries the blood of Marcus?" Before Julian could respond that he knew no Marcus, Thalia's expression shifted to one of shock. Her eyes widened, the crimson brightening until they blazed like twin suns. She moved with blinding speed, until she was mere inches from his face, inhaling deeply as if scenting him. "Impossible," she whispered then without warning, threw back her head and screamed a sound so filled with anguish and disbelief that it seemed to shake the very foundations of the temple. The scream echoed through the ancient halls, stirring dust from corners untouched for centuries. When it finally faded, Thalia was staring at him with an expression that mingled hope with horror. "After all these centuries," she whispered, reaching out with trembling fingers to touch his cheek, "the stars have brought you back to me." Julian stood transfixed, unable to move as her cool fingers brushed his skin, sending an electric sensation through his body. "I don't understand," he said. Finally, "I've never been here before." "Not you," she replied, "but the one whose blood runs through your veins, the one whose fate became entangled with mine 300 years ago when we dared to love across the void between our kinds." From the shadows behind her emerged another figure, taller and broader, with skin the color of midnight and eyes that glowed a fierce amber. "Thalia," he warned, "remember what happened last time." "I remember everything." "Kel," she responded, never taking her eyes from Julian. "How could I forget? But look at him, look at his eyes. The curse has found us once again." Julian looked between them, confusion giving way to a strange sense of recognition, as if some ancient memory in his cells was awakening. What? Curse? What does my blood have to do with any of this? Thalia's lips parted, revealing delicate fangs that gleamed in the dim light. The curse that binds me to the stars and to your bloodline until either I fade from existence or find redemption. She stepped back, her composure returning. You've walked into a story centuries in the making, Julian Reed, and now you've become part of it. Outside the temple, the forest had gone silent, as if the entire planet held its breath, waiting for what would come next. As Julian stood between two beings from a species he hadn't known existed, he felt the unmistakable sense that his life would never be the same. The mysteries of Noctera were only beginning to unfold, and somehow he stood at the center of a cosmic drama written in blood and starlight. Ancient echoes. Julian stared at Thalia, her violet skin reflecting the crimson light of the crystal altar. How do you know my name? He asked, stepping back to create distance between them. I never introduced myself. Thalia's eyes softened momentarily. I know much about you, Julian Reed, just as I knew Marcus Reed and Eldon Reed before him, and every bearer of your blood through centuries. She moved around the altar, her movements fluid like water flowing across stone. Your blood calls to me across the void, it always has. Kel approached, placing himself slightly between them, his protective stance unmistakable. Thalia, we should not be here. The elders will sense your awakening. His amber eyes assessed Julian with suspicious precision. This human does not understand what his presence means. Then help me understand, Julian said, finding his voice again. You scream at me, talk about my ancestors, curses and blood. What is this place? Who are you, really? Thalia exchanged a glance with Kel, who gave a reluctant nod. She turned back to Julian. We are Noctarians, the original inhabitants of this world, though most of my kind abandoned this planet millennia ago when the twin stars began to fade. Some of us remained bound by ancient oaths. She gestured to the temple walls. This sanctuary preserves our history, including the tale of how I became what your kind might call a vampire. Vampire? Julian repeated incredulously. That's mythological. Many myths are memories distorted by time. Kel interjected. The word may be different, but the essence remains. Your ancestors encountered Thalia's kind and interpreted our biological needs through the lens of their superstitions. Thalia approached the wall, running her fingers along one particular carving, showing humanoid figures beneath a strange constellation. 300 years ago, your ancestor Marcus Reed was part of the first human expedition to Noctera. We were already ancient by then, our civilization having mastered interstellar travel when humans were still discovering fire. She traced the carving where a human figure and a Noctarian stood hand in hand. Marcus and I formed a connection forbidden by both our peoples. I was already what you might call immortal, having undergone the Crimson Transformation centuries before. But our love threatened the carefully guarded separation between our species. Julian studied the carvings, seeing the story unfold in the ancient relief. The intimacy between the figures was unmistakable. What happened to you two? Thalia's expression darkened. The elders discovered our union. They couldn't tolerate what they saw as contamination of our bloodline. Her voice grew tight. They placed a curse upon me, binding my essence to Marcus's bloodline. I was condemned to exist between worlds, neither fully alive nor dead, dependent on the blood of his lineage to maintain my sanity, while eternally separated from those I love. That's why you recognized me, Julian whispered. You've been waiting for someone from my family to return. Not waiting, Kel corrected. Hunting the curse compels her to seek out descendants of Marcus whenever they come within her sphere, but it also torments her with memories and unfulfilled connection. Thalia withdrew an amulet from beneath her armor, a crystal similar to the one on the altar but smaller, containing what appeared to be a drop of blood suspended in its center. This contains Marcus's blood. The last piece I have of him. When he died, I thought the pain would end, but the curse ensured I would feel his absence eternally unless... Unless what? Julian asked, feeling strangely drawn to the amulet. unless the bloodline produces one who can break the cycle. Kel explained, his amber eyes studying Julian intently. One whose spirit matches Marcus's, exactly a cosmic twin born centuries later. Julian felt dizzy with the implications. And you think that's me? Because I look like him? Not just appearance, Thalia whispered, stepping closer. Your essence, your soul. I felt it the moment you entered Noctera's atmosphere. That's why. I've remained here all these years waiting while Kel guarded me through my darkest moments. Kel moved to a hidden compartment in the wall, retrieving a dusty metal box. Show him Thalia. He deserves to know what he stumbled into. With reverent care, Thalia opened the box, removing an ancient paper journal. Marcus kept records of his time here, his understanding of our world and his feelings. She handed it to Julian. Read it, see through his eyes. Julian accepted the journal with trembling hands. The pages were fragile, but the handwriting was remarkably similar to his own grandfather's, creating an eerie sense of familiarity. As he read random passages, his heart raced. April 15th, 2187. Today I met her again by the crystal falls. Her skin reminds me of twilight on Earth, yet there is nothing terrestrial about her grace. I know these meetings endanger us both, but I cannot stay away. June 3rd, 2187. Thalia showed me the ancient library today. The knowledge of her people spans millennia. Compared to them, we are children taking our first steps among the stars. Yet she looks at me as an equal. This feeling transcends worlds. August 27th, 2187. They are watching us now. The elders suspect I fear for Thalia more than myself. Her peoples. Punishments are said to transcend death itself. If they discover the blood ritual we performed binding our essences, I cannot bear to think of the consequences. Julian looked up from the journal to find Thalia watching him with centuries of pain evident in her eyes. He knew they would punish you? He tried to save me, Thalia said softly. When the elders came for us, Marcus offered his life in exchange for my freedom. Her voice broke. They took both his life and my freedom. They bound my existence to his bloodline, ensuring I would forever feel the echo of what we lost. I cannot truly live, nor can I die. I exist in perpetual twilight, sustained by memories and blood. And my presence here? Is it coincidence? Julian asked, though he already suspected the answer. Kel shook his head. There are no coincidences in a universe where blood and stardust intertwine. The curse draws you here just as it has drawn others from your line. But you are the first to actually find this temple, to stand before Thalia with Marcus's face and spirit. The implications settled over Julian like a weight. So what happens now? What do you want from me? Thalia exchanged a look with Kel before answering. The curse can be broken, Julian, but it requires sacrifice. It requires blood freely given and a choice made from true understanding. She stepped closer, her crimson eyes searching his. Will you help me discover if you are truly the one? Will you journey with us to the sacred sites of Noctera to learn if the stars have finally aligned to free us both? Julian felt as though he stood at a precipice, looking into an abyss filled with stars. He knew the rational response would be to return to his ship, to report his findings, and request extraction. But something deeper than reason pulled at him. The journal, the carvings, Thalia herself. All pieces of a puzzle he suddenly needed to solve. I'll help you, he said finally. But I need to understand everything. No more secrets. Thalia's expression softened relief washing over her features. Then we begin tonight when the twin moons align. She reached out hesitantly before withdrawing her hand. The journey will be dangerous. The forces that created the curse will fight to maintain it, and there are others of my kind who prefer I remain bound. Why would they want that? Julian asked. Kel's expression darkened. Because your ancestor and Thalia discovered something the elders have kept hidden for millennia, a truth about our species and yours that could change everything. He looked to the temple entrance, and we are not alone in this sanctuary anymore. They already know you've arrived." As if summoned by his words, a cold wind swept through the temple, extinguishing the bioluminescent lights Julian had brought. The only illumination came from Thalia's glowing eyes and the pulsing crimson crystal. On the walls, the carved figures seemed to move in the shifting shadows as ancient secrets prepared to awaken after centuries of slumber. Part 3. Stellar Wounds. The twin moons of Noctera hung low in the night sky, bathing the forest in ethereal silver light. Julian adjusted the survival pack Kel had given him, containing provisions and ancient maps of the planet's surface. They had left the temple hours ago, moving swiftly through terrain that would have been impassable without his guides. "We're being followed," Thalia whispered, her crimson eyes scanning the darkness behind them. "3 of them keeping their distance but tracking our sentinels." Kel confirmed, his expression grim. "The elders move faster than I anticipated. They must have been watching the temple since they detected your awakening." Julian glanced nervously over his shoulder, seeing nothing but shadows among the bioluminescent trees. "What happens if they catch us?" "They won't take you," Thalia assured him, moving closer, her violet skin almost luminous in the moonlight. "Your blood is too valuable. But they would separate us. Return me to my chamber beneath the mountain where I've spent most of the last 3 centuries." The thought of Thalia imprisoned in darkness made Julian's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. He'd known her less than a day, yet felt connected to her in ways that defied rational explanation. "Where are we going exactly?" "The Crimson Falls," Kel replied, pointing to a distant mountain range where faint red light pulsed against the night sky. The source of the transformation, the place where Thalia became what she is. They walked in silence for a time, Julian studying Thalia's profile as she moved with preternatural grace beside him. "You said you were transformed," he finally said. "What were you before?" A sad smile touched Thalia's lips. "I was born a daughter of House Ves, one of the 12 noble houses of Noctera. Our people were already ancient when I came into being 500 years ago." She touched a ceremonial marking on her armor. "I was chosen for the Crimson Gift. At 200 years of age, considered young for such an honor." 200 years, Julian echoed. "Your natural lifespan. Nocterians typically live 800 years. Kel interjected. "Those who undergo the transformation become functionally immortal, though at great cost." "The transformation wasn't meant to be a curse," Thalia explained. "It was our way of preserving knowledge across millennia. The elders chose those with exceptional abilities to transcend natural life, become vessels of memory and wisdom." "But it changed when you met Marcus." Julian guessed. Thalia nodded. "The Crimson Gift requires regular consumption of life essence, what you might call blood from your own species. When Marcus and I performed our blood ritual, binding our essences, it altered something fundamental in my transformation. I became connected to his bloodline, unable to sustain myself properly without it." "That's the physical aspect of the curse," Kel added. "The emotional aspect is crueler. Thalia feels the presence of Marcus's bloodline across vast distances, drawn to it like a celestial body caught in gravitational pull. Yet she is forbidden true connection, doomed to watch each generation live and die while she endures." Julian processed this information as they crossed a narrow ridge overlooking a valley filled with strange crystalline formations. "These ancestors of mine who came before me. Did you find them all?" Pain flashed across Thalia's features. "Not all. Some lived and died, never knowing I existed. Others I found too late." Her voice dropped to a whisper. 3 times I came close to someone from your line. Each encounter ended in tragedy. The last was your great-grandfather, Victor Reed. He came to Noctera 80 years ago as part of a scientific expedition. My great-grandfather? Julian stopped walking, staring at her. He disappeared on a research mission. They never found his ship, because he chose to stay, Thalia said softly. For a time, we had 7 months together before the elders found us. She looked away. They took him from me. His ship was destroyed, his records erased from your guild archives. Julian felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. His family had mourned. Victor Reed built a memorial on Earth, never knowing the truth. Did he know about Marcus, about the curse? He discovered it gradually through the dreams. Thalia explained, the blood connection sometimes allows memories to transfer across generations. Your dreams, of distant stars and violet skin, what brought you to become a cartographer, to seek unexplored worlds, those weren't entirely your own desires, Julian. The revelation struck him like a physical blow. The dreams that had shaped his life, his career, choices, his inexplicable fascination with fringe star systems, all echoes of a connection he hadn't known existed. We should keep moving. Kel interrupted, scanning the forest behind them. They're getting closer. They quickened their pace, descending into a ravine where massive fungi released spores that glowed like fireflies in the darkness. Julian's mind raced with questions, but survival took precedence. As they emerged from the ravine, Thalia suddenly froze, her head tilting as if listening to something beyond human perception. Down, she shouted, shoving Julian to the ground as something whistled through the air where his head had been. 3 figures materialized from the darkness, their forms, similar to Thalia and Kel, but adorned with more elaborate armor. Their eyes glowed blue rather than crimson or amber, marking them as different from his companions. Hand over the human, Thalia. The central figure commanded, his voice resonating with authority. The elders have been merciful despite your transgressions. Do not test their patience further. Kel stepped forward, his posture shifting to a fighting stance. Vanos still serving as the elder's puppet, I see. Some things never change in 3 centuries. This doesn't concern you, Guardian. Vanos replied, your oath is to protect Thalia, not to aid her rebellion. Protecting her means honoring her choices. Kel growled, something you never understood. Thalia helped Julian to his feet, keeping her body between him and the newcomers. Tell the elders I will not return to the chamber. I have found another reed. The prophecy is in motion. Vanos's expression hardened. There is no prophecy, only the delusions of a blood-bound transformed. The human comes with us. Your punishment will be determined later. I'm not going anywhere with you, Julian stated, finding courage in Thalia's protective stance. I came here willingly, as did Marcus, as did Victor. Vanos said dismissively. All of them believed they had choice. All of them were simply playing their part in Thalia's endless tragedy. Before Julian could respond, Thalia moved with blinding speed, launching herself at Vanos. While they clashed in a blur of motion, Kel engaged the other 2 sentinels. Julian stood frozen, watching beings with centuries of combat experience battle with inhuman grace and power. One of the sentinels broke away, heading toward Julian. Instinctively, he reached for his pulse pistol, firing 3 rapid shots. The energy blast seemed to merely slow the approaching figure. Julian backed away, searching desperately for an escape route. Julian, run! Thalia shouted between blows. Follow the crystal path, we'll find you. Adrenaline surging, Julian turned and sprinted toward a narrow trail lined with glowing crystals. Behind him, the sounds of combat faded as he pushed deeper into unknown territory. The path wound through increasingly dense vegetation until he could no longer see the moons overhead. Only the crystals provided illumination, their light pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat, guiding him forward. After what felt like hours, Julian stumbled into a clearing and froze in wonder. Before him stretched a vast lake, its surface glowing crimson from within. In the center stood a small island dominated by a massive crystalline formation, similar to the one in the temple, but exponentially larger. The crimson falls exhausted. Julian collapsed at the shore's edge. His mind raced with everything. He'd learned his very presence on Noctera wasn't coincidence but destiny, shaped by blood and ancient curses. As his breathing steadied, he noticed his reflection in the crimson water. But it wasn't quite his face staring back. The features were subtly different, older with a scar across one eyebrow. Marcus? Julian whispered, touching his own unblemished face. The reflection smiled sadly. then dissolved into ripples as something disturbed the water's surface. Julian scrambled backward as a figure emerged from the crimson depths. Thalia, her violet skin glistening with droplets that looked like blood in the strange light. "You found it," she said softly, approaching him. "The sacred place. How did you—" he began, then noticed she was alone. "Where's Kel?" Pain flashed across her features. "Holding them off, giving us time." She knelt beside him, examining him for injuries. "You're unharmed. That's good." "Thalia, what is this place really?" Julian asked, gesturing to the crimson lake. "What aren't you telling me?" She sat beside him, her shoulder barely touching his, creating an electric awareness between them. "This is where it began. The source of the crimson gift. The place where my kind first discovered immortality." She looked toward the crystal formation on the island, "and it's where the curse can be broken." "How?" Julian asked, feeling both fear and anticipation. Thalia turned to face him, her crimson eyes studying him with centuries of longing. "The curse binds us through blood, but it can be undone through choice." She reached out hesitantly, touching his face. "I've waited so long for you, Julian. Not for Marcus Reborn, but for you yourself. The one who could see me as I am, not as legend or monster." Something shifted between them in that moment. The connection that had been building since their first encounter crystallized into undeniable attraction. Julian found himself leaning toward her, drawn by forces beyond rational explanation. "I've dreamed of you," he whispered. "All my life, without knowing your name or face, I've been searching for something I couldn't name. And I have waited." Thalia replied, her voice breaking with emotion. "Watching stars die and civilizations rise, always alone, always remembering." Her fingers traced his jawline. "But now you're here and I'm afraid." "Of what?" Julian asked, their faces now inches apart. "That you'll make the same choice Victor made, Marcus made." She closed her eyes briefly. "That you'll sacrifice everything for me only to be taken away. That the cycle will continue endlessly." Julian didn't fully understand the forces at work or the history that bound them together. But in this moment, with Thalia's violet skin illuminated by crimson light, he knew with absolute certainty that he would face whatever came next at her side. He closed the distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that seemed to ignite the very air around them. Time seemed to stop as they embraced beneath the alien sky. The kiss deepened, Thalia's arms encircling him with careful restraint, conscious of her greater strength. When they finally parted, Julian felt forever changed, as though some essential part of him had awakened after lifelong slumber. "Tomorrow we cross to the island," Thalia whispered against his lips. "Tonight we rest and I will tell you everything. The true history of our peoples. The secret Marcus and I discovered. The reason the elders fear our connection so deeply as they sat together beneath the strange constellations of Noctera." Julian realized he stood at the center of a story centuries in the making. His life, his career, his very existence leading to this moment, with this extraordinary being. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt like he had finally come home after a lifetime of wandering. In the distance, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the horizon. But it wasn't thunder. Julian realized with sudden dread. It was the sound of pursuit. The night was far from over, and dawn might bring either salvation or destruction. Crimson eclipse. Dawn broke over the crimson lake, casting blood-red reflections across the shore where Julian and Thalia had made camp. The night had passed in whispered confessions and cautious touches, as barriers between them dissolved. Thalia had revealed the final piece of the mystery, the true origin of both their species. "The elders arrive," Thalia said, suddenly rising to her feet. "And Kel is with them." Julian stood scanning the tree line, where 6 figures emerged, Kel at their center, his proud posture now diminished. 4 elders flanked him, their ancient faces bearing expressions of cold fury. The 6th figure was Vanos, looking triumphant. "Thalia Ves," The foremost elder spoke, her voice carrying despite its softness. You have gone too far. This time the human must be returned to his kind before more damage is done. He knows the truth, matriarch. Thalia replied, standing protectively near Julian. About our shared ancestry. The fabricated division between our species. Your lies. Julian stepped forward. I know that humans and Noctarians evolved from the same source, that we're not different species, but branches of the same tree. That your transformation process was meant to reunite us, not separate us. The matriarch's eyes narrowed. Dangerous half-truths, child. Thalia has filled your head with romantic notions. The curse exists for protection, not punishment. Protection of your power, Thalia countered. The bond between our bloodlines threatens the hierarchy you've maintained for millennia. If others learned that transformation was meant to be shared with humans, that we were never meant to be separate, enough, the matriarch commanded. The air itself seemed to vibrate with her authority. The human leaves. The cycle ends. Julian felt Thalia's hand slip into his. Their fingers intertwining. We're crossing to the island. Thalia announced. The prophecy will be fulfilled. The choice will be made freely. You'll never reach it. Vanos stepped forward, drawing a crystalline weapon. The human dies here, ending the bloodline once and for all. What happened next unfolded in heartbeats. Vanos fired. Kel broke free from his captors, throwing himself into the path of the blast. A terrible cry escaped Thalia as her guardian fell. The lake behind them began to glow with increasing intensity, responding to the violence on its shore. Now Julian. Thalia pulled him toward the water. The crossing opens. They plunged into the crimson waters, swimming desperately toward the central island. Behind them, chaos erupted as the elders and their sentinels gave pursuit. The liquid around them grew warmer, seeming to support rather than hinder their movement. Julian felt energy surging through him, strength beyond normal human capacity. When they reached the island, dragging themselves onto crystalline shores, Thalia turned to him, her eyes blazing. The choice comes now, Julian. The crystals activate only during the eclipse, which begins in moments. She gestured to the twin suns now moving into alignment. You must decide. What choice? Julian asked breathlessly. What does the prophecy actually require? Thalia's expression softened with unbearable tenderness. For the curse to break, one must sacrifice. The transformed must become mortal again, giving up immortality. Or, her voice faltered, the human must join the transformed, becoming like me, bound to stars and blood forever. Julian understood finally. The choice wasn't just about breaking a curse. It was about which of them would fundamentally change to join the other's world. What did Victor choose? He asked, though he suspected the answer. He chose to transform, Thalia whispered. But the process was interrupted. The elders took him before it completed, leaving him trapped between worlds. They kept him imprisoned until his natural life ended. The eclipse began, darkness sweeping across the landscape. The crystal formation at the island's center pulsed with increasing brilliance. Behind them, the elders waded through the crimson waters, their ancient faces twisted with determination. I choose. Julian began, looking deeply into Thalia's eyes that had haunted his dreams across lifetimes. The crystals surged with light enveloping them. Both cutting off his words, time seemed to stop as visions flashed before him. Marcus and Thalia centuries ago making their own choice. Victor's interrupted transformation. Countless moments of Thalia alone watching stars die, waiting for him. In the crimson light, Thalia's violet skin gleamed as she reached for him. Whatever happens, know that I have loved you across centuries, in every lifetime, in every form. Julian pulled her close as the eclipse reached totality, and the crystal's energy surrounded them in a cocoon of light. Their lips met in a desperate kiss as the choice materialized between them. Like matter and antimatter, colliding, their separate destinies could not coexist without transformation. Behind them, the elders reached the shore, crying out in ancient tongues as power older than their civilization awakened. The crystal pulsed one final time before erupting in brilliant light that consumed everything in its path. As consciousness faded, Julian's last thought was that whatever awaited on the other side, he would face it with Thalia beside him, finally breaking the cycle that had bound them across centuries. Darkness fell, the eclipse complete. The choice made, but whether in victory or defeat remained to be seen. Beyond eternity, Julian awakened to unfamiliar sensations. His body felt simultaneously lighter and more substantial, each heartbeat resonating with newfound intensity. He opened his eyes to find himself lying beside Thalia on the crystalline shore of the island. The eclipse had passed twin suns now hanging low on the horizon. "You're alive," Thalia whispered, her voice filled with wonder. She reached out, touching his face with trembling fingers. "I thought I'd lost you." Julian sat up slowly, examining himself. His skin retained its human coloration, but beneath the surface a faint luminescence pulsed with each heartbeat. When he looked at Thalia, he gasped. Her formerly violet skin now held a warmer hue, closer to human tones, though still distinctly alien. Her eyes remained crimson but softer, less intense. "What happened?" he asked. "The choice I was making it, and then the crystal chose for us," she explained, helping him stand. "Something unprecedented, something not even in the ancient texts." She gestured around. Them Julian noticed for the first time that they were alone. The elders and their sentinels were nowhere to be seen. "Where did they go?" "Not where," came Kel's voice, as he emerged from behind the crystal formation. His injuries healed, though he moved with careful precision. "When the crystal didn't just transform you both, it shifted reality itself." Julian looked questioningly at Thalia, who smiled with newfound peace. "We exist in between now." Julian neither fully transformed nor fully mortal. The crystal merged our essences, creating balance. She touched her chest. "I feel your humanity in me, your compassion, your mortality. And I feel your connection to the stars." Julian realized, the ancient knowledge, your strength. He looked toward the distant shore. "The elders?" "Returned to their time," Kel explained. "The crystal's power created a fracture, allowing us to slip between moments. We exist now in a pocket of time separate from both our worlds." Thalia took Julian's hands in hers. "The curse is broken not by sacrifice but by synthesis. We are something new, Julian. Neither human nor Noctarian, but the beginning of what both our species were always meant to become." "How long do we have?" Julian asked, understanding instinctively that this moment of grace must be temporary. "A lifetime," she answered, her eyes shining. "Not immortality, but not the brief span of a single human life either. Centuries perhaps together." Kel nodded. "I will guard the crystal, ensuring no others follow. The path you've created until the worlds are ready." He bowed deeply. "My oath is fulfilled, yet I choose to remain your guardian across time." Julian pulled Thalia close, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. Now their bodies resonating at the same frequency. "What now? Where do we go?" Thalia smiled, pointing to the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Everywhere, the universe awaits us, Julian. Places neither human nor Noctarian has walked. We'll map the stars together, charting a course for others who might someday follow. A cartographer and a star walker?" Julian laughed. "Quite the partnership." "More than partners," Thalia whispered, leaning in to kiss him. "Two halves of something greater, something beyond eternity," as twilight settled over Noctera. Julian and Thalia stood at the edge of the crimson lake, their transformed bodies glowing softly in the gathering darkness. Behind them, the crystal pulsed quietly, preserving their moment of creation for future generations. To discover ahead lay countless stars and planets, unmapped territories where they would write their story. A new Kel watched from the crystal's shadow, as the pair waded into the lake, now returned to its natural blue hue. The curse's crimson stain, lifted at last. "Safe journey," he whispered as they disappeared beneath the surface, emerging on shores yet unknown. The ancient prophecy had been fulfilled, not as anyone had expected, but as the universe itself had intended. Through the union of two, beings separated by time and space, a new path had been forged. Beyond the boundaries of mortality and transformation, beyond the artificial divisions between kindred species, beyond even the curse that had bound them across centuries, in time their story would fade into legend. Whispers of the human cartographer and his violet-skinned beloved who defied death and transcended species. Would future generations believe such tales? Perhaps not. But somewhere among the distant stars, Julian and Thalia continued their journey together, mapping new worlds and creating their own constellation, guided by a love that had quite literally rewritten the stars. The end.